Got one. My dad used to make me, I built pallets. Used thousands of nails a day. And I'd bend one, and my dad would make me straighten it and reuse it, every time. So you'd think I would know how to drive it in. All right. Just a little out of, that probably would help, but I lost mine. Well, I actually didn't lose them. The dog ate them. So. There we go. Whew! All right. Coffee break. All right, is that the way it works? John, Brandy, come on up. They don't know they're doing this. I'm picking on them. They're just newly married, so I thought this will work. You need coffee break. There you go. All right. Here's what I'd like for you to do. This is called the V cable, but it's bored. So what I want you to do is step across from each other, face to face. Just do it right here first. Don't step on the boards. Put your hands straight up.
Don't step on the boards?
Not yet. I just want to show you the proper position first.
All right.
All right. And then what you're going to do is step backwards a little bit and keep pushing pressure on your hands. Lean toward one another. Okay? Well, you get what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
Okay, don't do it yet. Okay. All right, come here. Okay, start right here.
Okay.
All right. Now step on the board. Put your hands together, up high. Now walk down the board and stay on the board all the way to the end.
Do not push each other.
Lean on each other. You got to lean on each other. Don't bring it. Okay, wait, stop. See, you're bringing your hands down instead of leaning on each other. There you go. There you go. There you go. All right, good job. Good job, guys. Good job. All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate that. That wasn't too hard, was it?
Nah.
You see, a lot of times we get people on it, and they start doing this. They're trying to hold themselves up, and the problem with that is they're relying on who? Themselves. They're not relying on their partner. And in life, when things get harder, it's not just a marriage thing. You need somebody. Okay? And I'll explain as we get to it. All right, so we asked you at the very beginning, during the welcome, to give directions to where you're going or to how to get to your house or your place of employment, right? How many gave directions based on landmarks? Like, remember Uncle Jim's house or that big tree? Anybody do that? All right, yeah, we had a few like that. Anybody, Davy Crockett's, they gave directions based on the points of the compass, north, south, east, or west. Anybody do that? Okay, a few of those. Anybody pull out your Google Maps and say, here it is. We just put it in. Siri, where is McDonald's? All right. Restaurant near me. So we have a tendency to get to a destination, and it's interesting how we perceive directions. I've told you this over and over, and it's not new, but my wife will call me at times and go, where am I? I don't know where you are. But I'll ask her, landmarks. What's around you? I grew up here. This is easy for me. She was telling me growing up in Venezuela, it wasn't that easy. In a town of, 3 million people? Very big city. And she was telling me that sometimes you'd ask for directions, and they didn't know, but they would go ahead and give you directions. Yeah, and so that's kind of scary, when you stop and think about it. Anybody ever drive through a big city and end up in an area of the city? You're like, lock the doors, don't make any facial contact, don't look at anybody, just look straight ahead, right? Or you stop and they come up and they wash your windshield real quick, and you're like, what do I do? I can't roll down my window. I'm afraid they'll do something. Yeah, exactly. And so, as we go through life, we have been talking about destination. And our key verse is Psalms 119, 105. Thy word, say it with me, is a lamp unto my feet and what? a light unto my path. And so we believe that the direction that you're going will lead you to a destination. Direction, not your intention, will lead you to a destination. You know, at the beginning we said if you get on I-49 and you head south, you know, you'll end up at the Gulf. You know, if you pack all your stuff for the beach and you get to I-49 and you turn left, you go north, you're not going to end up at the Gulf, are you? Yeah. You might get to a coast, but it won't be the one that you were wanting to get to. And so we believe that every direction has a destination. And you have been told stories, and you've told stories to people where they go, didn't you know that would take you there? Don't you understand that, you know, as they begin to start telling the story, you're going, I already know where this ends up. You've watched movies, you've seen TV shows like that, and you go, I already know who did it. I already know what's going to happen at the end. You know, I have fun with that with my wife as we'll watch a movie, and I go, I already know who did it. How'd you know? You know, it's like, or I'll say, I know what the next line is, you know, because sometimes it's so predictable. And so today we're going to talk about detours. Ever been on a detour? I went, one year we did a man's ride on the motorcycles. We went to North Carolina and did the Dragon's Tail. It's about 11-mile stretch of road, has 316 curves. Awesome. I love cornering on a motorcycle or a Mustang GT, you know, or anything like that. It's just, I just love feeling some G-force. And so one year we did a couples ride. Danny Kinzer and his wife Katie and myself and Marcia ended up being the only ones on a Labor Day weekend. We hardtailed it out there, rode straight out there, rode straight back. And on the way back, coming close to Nashville, we get detoured. I-40 is completely shut down. And we get off on these back roads. Man, we saw some pretty scenery. It was pretty awesome. But can you imagine being detoured with interstate traffic on a 2-lane road for 20 miles? I couldn't go as fast as I wanted to go. I couldn't lean the motorcycle as sharp as I wanted to lean it, you know. I couldn't do the stuff because there were so many people around it because we were on a detour. And then, of course, you know, once we get back on the interstate, what do? I'm just following Danny, and he just takes off. It's Danny's fault, okay? I'm just saying that because he's not here, and I can say that. And so there was a little bitty red car in front of us, and they were flying a little bit faster than the speed limit. I'm not going to tell you how fast. But we were going into Nashville, and going into Nashville, we were doing pretty good. We're trying to make up time, right? You ever do that? You ever try to make up time in your life? And so we're coming into Nashville, and we come up over this ridge. You know, the interstate traffic, it's busted into 3 lanes on each side. So we got 6 lanes of traffic. And there's blue lights on the side of the road. What do you typically do when you see blue lights? No, you speed up because he's busy. So he's not going to mess with you at all. But he's standing on the side of the road, and he's going. And I'm like, who's he talking to? Little red car is in front of me. He doesn't pull over. Danny's in front of me. He doesn't pull over. I don't pull over either. He must be talking to somebody else. I mean, there's lots of cars right there on the road. So we just keep going, hoping he won't catch up. But guess what? Danny and I are riding side by side. We look back in the rearview mirror. It's about the same time, and we look at each other and went, pull over. It gets both of us. We both pull over. I'm glad he pulled over too because I was afraid I'd pull over and he'd go on, you know. No, he wouldn't do that. So the detour cost us time. We tried to make up time, which cost us money. And the officer was really nice after we talked to him for a little bit and calmed him down because he was mad we didn't pull over. And he said, now, if you want this off your record, if you don't want it to show up on your driving record, then when you get home, you log on to the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and there'll be a little test for you to take on the computer. And if you pass the test, then this ticket won't show up on your record. Of course I took that. That's awesome, you know, be able to do that. The detour took us out of the way that we needed to go. It cost us time more than we thought we needed to spend because we had had a time limit. We needed to get back. People needed to get back to work. And then it ended up costing us more because we thought, hey, we can handle this. We can do this. We know what we're doing. Doesn't matter how fast we drive. We understand what we're doing. We can do this. Detours do that to our life. You know, there was another time that we were on a detour. Ryan and I were taking a semi-truck, and we were coming back, picked up a trailer in Chicago, and we're coming through Rolla, Missouri. We stop at a truck stop, and the cashier says, hey, there is a big accident, and it's got the whole interstate shut down. We were kind of wondering, it was late at night, but we were kind of wondering why we're not seeing, other traffic. And so we thought, well, we'll head on because it's supposed to be quite a ways down the road. Maybe by the time we get there, it'll open up, and we'll keep going. And so sure enough, we get going, and we get down there, and all of a sudden we just seen a line of red lights like a Christmas tree, lights wrapped around the house. It's just, oh, okay, we'll stop before we get there. And so we stopped. We assessed the situation. We looked at maps, and we thought, hey, there is a way around. We can get off on this road, turn around, do this traffic, And so we did. It took us about 5 hours to get back to where we needed to be. It was an interesting, ride at night with Ryan driving the truck down 2-lane road, It's like, So by the time we got where we needed to go, we heard through the CB and stuff that the interstate had opened up. We had an option. I mean, it would have been 5 hours sitting in traffic, or it would have been 5 hours driving. And of course, when you think you're moving, you're doing something, right? See, sometimes detours cause us kind of a stalemate. Sometimes we need to stop and wait rather than keep going. Sometimes your life, all of us in this room have had detours. Not just traffic detours, but our lives have blown up. Finances have blown up, marriage has blown up, relationships have blown up, work has blown up. At some point, you've had plans. You had directions. You knew exactly the next steps that needed to be taken, and then something happened. It could have been your health failed. It could have been, something that you had no control, like an accident that just happened and blew your world up, and you were on a detour. I didn't plan for this. I don't know where this detour is going to take us, but you're on a detour. And what do? Let me ask you this question. I don't want you to raise your hand, but I want you to think about it. In the deepest, darkest time in your life, when you're on that detour, how many of us have asked the question or assumed God left us? God's not here. God's not answering my prayer. God's not doing anything, or I wouldn't have been in this situation. You see, so many times in our life, we as followers, we have this, I don't know I don't really know how to put it into words, other than we think we're following the most powerful, the most all-knowing, the most magnificent, the most awesome God in the universe. He should be glad I'm on His team, and He should take better care of me, because He can take care of everything. We have that thinking that goes on. I mean, don't you want an easy life? We do, don't we? We don't want any problems. I mean, when something breaks down, when something goes wrong, anybody have a starter go out this week? Anybody have a hydraulic hose break this week? Anybody's battery give it up? Brakes go out, Ryan goes, I need to borrow his truck yesterday, and it's a 63 Chevy. It was my grandfather's truck, and I said, I need to run to the bank real quick. I had the semi-truck. It doesn't fit through the drive-thru very well. So I said, I'm going to borrow your truck. He goes, the brakes, there's no brake fluid. I said, that's okay. I don't need brakes. I grew up without brakes. But he said, when you hit the brakes, that right wheel will lock up, and it does. So when he got home, I was like, go to the O'Reilly's. I've already ordered your brakes and your drums, so we'll put them on today. So And so this is break week at the Walker house because Lene's bringing breaks to me too to fix. So, but how many times in our lives we feel like we got the shaft and God failed in his job to take care of us? Don't we think that? So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to James chapter 1. We're going to show you some stuff. We'll show you the scriptures as well. As we talk about detours, and we're going to look at how do we respond to detours in our life. And the reason I use this to tie this in, so you guys wondering, why did he do this and why did John and Brandy do this? I used to take students to Iowa every year, and we would run a camp. And the students were in charge of designing the camp, the Bible studies, the activities, the games and all this stuff. And so it was really cool. It was students, children, basically 3rd grade through 6th grade, that would come from all over Iowa to this camp. And so I would do I'd do several different faith challenging abilities, and one of them was the V cable. I always loved doing the V cable because now they had a solid foundation, but the cable is loose on purpose, and it swings and it gives, and it really makes the kids have to lean on each other. You see, it's interesting. We go through life and we think this, okay? You ever had to walk a straight line, heel to toe? You don't have to answer that. But just the idea of walking heel, I'm sorry, but walking heel to toe, it makes you, and I'm just 1.5 inches off the ground, and it's throwing my balance off a little bit, and we have a tendency, to be a little bit unstable. Now, if I put the board on edge, which I thought about doing, but I'm not that good, but just the idea. What's interesting? I would take the students and I would put them on this ability, this challenge, and give them the challenge to do this. We had 2 big telephone poles that went across the creek. So that would be the next challenge. And it's about 6 foot off the ground at the deepest part of the creek that went under. And the children, they would freak out. 6 feet seemed like 10 feet to them. But my head is looking right at their feet, and so we do the same challenge with them where they have to lean on somebody to go across it. And it's 2 parallel. It doesn't get wider. It's just parallel straight across. When I limb a tree that I cut down, I walk the tree and I limb with my chainsaw. My chainsaw is my balance. But there are times that I'm doing it and I just need a little bit of extra stability. I just touch a branch. I don't grab it. It's already been cut a lot of times. I just touch it. I need a point of reference to gain balance, to gain steadfastness. Now, keep that in mind as we look at James chapter 1. Would you go ahead and show that to me? James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, the Israel dispersed, okay? Talking about the 12 tribes of Israel. And we'll be talking about the 12 tribes here in just a little bit, how they come together. It's interesting. We're looking at James. Now, James is a great book to read. It is written by James, the brother of who? Now, this is important to us. I mean, think about it. What would it take for one of your siblings, okay, to prove to you that he was Jesus, that he was the Messiah? And so here we have James, who we don't know, but it seems like as they were growing up, there was no reference of James, following Jesus. I mean, it'd really be rough to be James. I mean, think about it. How many times did his parents say, "Why can't you be more like Jesus, James?" Think about this. At the next wedding he went to, after Jesus turned the water into wine and Jesus is not there, and everybody comes up and says, "Hey, we're out of wine, James. Hint, hint. Can't you do this? Can't you do what your brother did?" The whole idea is that all of a sudden James here, and he becomes one of the major leaders in the church in Jerusalem. And so he writes this letter to the 12 tribes. He's writing to his fellow Israelites. Look at verse 2. And he immediately jumps into this. Because now remember, they're dispersed. Something's happened. Their world has blown up. They're leaving. They've had to leave their home. They've been driven out. There's been wars that have happened. Not just Jesus has been crucified, but the fact that they were dispersed, they were driven out of their countries, out of their cities. They're being persecuted by the Romans. James goes on and says, count it what? Woohoo! War broke out. Awesome! That didn't sound right. Did you ever drive a nail and hit your thumbnail? And you just said, praise you, Jesus. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Right? Some of you are like, blinkety blink. You used Jesus, but it was in a different way. My brothers, when you meet trials of how many kinds? Various kinds. Have we had trials this week? Some of you had Monday twice, right? I mean, just the idea that we have problems. If it's not one thing, it's 10 others. But look at this, verse 3. For you know. Don't you know? You know. I mean, James points this out to us. You know. Don't you know this? That the testing of what? Your faith. Luckily, not mine. I'm a preacher. I got it paid. No. The testing of your faith produces what? Steadfastness. When you get off balance, even the troubles that you have can be the touch point to get you focused so that you become steadfast and you're not knocked off your feet. He goes on and he says this, and let the steadfastness have its what? Full effect. This is like a crock pot, not a microwave. It's a crock pot. I talked to a pizza guy yesterday. I thought this was interesting. He was telling me about a pizza oven that actually cooked a pizza in a minute and a half. I mean, we're such a quick, want-it-now society that they've got this oven hooked up to over 1,000 degrees, and it spins in a circle, and they can throw that pizza in there. By the time it makes its full revolution, it's ready. And he goes, it's fast. He goes, but it's not as good. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, even pizza. He goes, a pizza that's cooked 25 minutes is so much better than a pizza that's cooked a minute and a half, because it gives its time for all the flavors come together. And that grease to, just melt down and making y'all hungry now, right? To the point that it's that bite, it's that taste, it's that flavor that all comes together. This is a crock pot mentality, not a microwave mentality. So that the trial that you go through needs to run its course, because it'll produce that steadfastness that you don't get knocked off your feet. Now, don't get me wrong. You're going to get knocked off your feet, and you're going to need to get back up, and you're going to need to step back in. My dad ended up cutting his thumb off at the sawmill. He built this thing. He built the pulleys. He designed the mechanisms. And he got a blade, and he put it together, and he was running it, and that blade just wouldn't quite stand up and run like it was supposed to. And so you know this story. I was out in the garage working on a truck that we were putting to resell, and I was in the floorboard fixing it, and I heard the sound because something happened. Something hit the saw blade that didn't sound right. Didn't sound like wood. And so I popped up, and there goes Dad. Runs out the door. I call Mom. And I decided, after they did the surgery, put the thumb back on, it worked. We saw it move, but then gangrene set in here, and they had to go back in and take it back off. And my mom did work out, but, that was my dad's income. It's my senior year in high school. I was playing football. I was finishing up the year. It was in the fall, and I decided, you know what? I went to the team. I didn't talk to anybody. I decided I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit football. I could get out of school at noon. I could finish up. I'm going to go home. I'm going to run the sawmill. I knew how to do it. I was trained. I'll do this. And so I did. I told the football team, I'm sorry, but guys, I got to quit, and I'm going to go work. And And I did. I told Dad after that, I'm going to come home at noon and work because I had transportation. I could do this. And my dad was like, I'm going to run that sawmill. But Dad, you just cut off your thumb. And he said this, you got to get back up on the horse. You can't let it knock you down. If it knocks you down, you got to get back up. Now, we kind of, Americans, we pull on our own bootstraps and we're going to make it happen. Sometimes we make it happen so much that it puts us on another detour and then on another detour. And we're never getting to our destination. It's leading us in the wrong direction. It's like we're just running in circles. We're spinning our wheels and we're not getting it done. Let me tell you, I picked out a story out of Genesis, and it's about the story of Joseph. It picks up around chapters 38, I think, or 36. Now, it's interesting. The story of Joseph makes up, that one life is talked about more in the book of Genesis than any other life. And we've learned about the story of Joseph. He was the guy that had the coat of what? Many colors. So we know about Joseph. It's a great story. We learned it in Sunday school, learned all this stuff. And so we know the story of Joseph, but I want us to take a little microscope and just kind of look in it and just different spots of his life and kind of compare it. Because I know at times you think your life is rough, that you've got a lot of stuff going on and you don't have time for this. Anytime when something breaks down, like, I ain't got time for this. But think about this. Joseph, we have his story. And we have his story for a reason. And I think it goes back to James, who says, count it all joy. So it's interesting that we find in the story of Joseph, and let me give you a little bit of background. Joseph, his forefathers were Abraham. Abraham didn't have any children. God said, I'm going to make your children, your offspring, as far as the stars are in the sky. And Abraham was past childbearing years. And God took something that was dead and made it alive. And so you had Abraham produced Isaac. Isaac had 2 children, 2 boys, basically. Right? They had more children than that, but the 2 boys were played out. Isaac had, Isaac had Esau. Esau was a hairy man like me. He was a man's man. He drove that big 450, F450, jacked up, 4-wheel drive. He was a man, had, mossy oak everywhere, all over it, carried guns, but no big deal. And his brother, Jacob, was like the Mazda Miata guy, wearing the polo shirts and the collars and playing golf and doing all this stuff. And the Bible talks about how Esau was daddy's favorite and Jacob was mama's boy. Now, if anybody would get this better than anybody up to this point in history, you'd think it'd be Jacob, knowing about favoritism. But Jacob, he has to kind of run for his life. Mama sends him over to his uncle's house to find a wife. This must be southern Israel. And so he goes to his uncle's house and he finds a wife, Rachel. Loves her. She must love him back. Talks to Laban, his uncle. He says, I'd like to marry my cousin. That's why I mean it's southern Israel. And so the whole idea is that he goes, well, I'll let you do that, but you've got to work 7 years. And I'll let you marry her. 7 years go by. He works really hard, he's building up his stuff for his family to get started. And the wedding happens. And after the wedding night, he wakes up to the next morning and he looks over and he says, hey, honey, and it's his sister-in-law that he married, the older sister, Leah. Wait a minute, I married the wrong woman. So he went and talked to father-in-law and said, hey, what'd you do to me? You see, in the culture, this is interesting. Parents, this kind of help you out. Kids, it'll freak you out. But the wedding bed was sacred, very sacred. And that first wedding night, the bed is completely veiled. You can't see in it. And the culture says that the bride's parents and the groom's parents spent the night outside the marriage bed all night long. Yeah, that's awkward. I get it. So you wonder, how in the world did Jacob end up with the wrong woman? Because the bride's parents would bring her to her side of the bed and would let her get in to her side of the bed that was veiled. And the groom's parents would bring the groom. And it was a ceremony of bringing the two together that they could become one, as God had designed. Just Laban ended up bringing the older sister in. The next morning, Jacob's like, wait a minute, you just messed me over. And he's like, well, I know I said you could marry Rachel, but I figured in 7 years Leah would get married. I know she's not that pretty, but, hey, I don't know. We don't know if she's pretty or not. It was just the idea that I couldn't let her be married before Rachel. Bill, I'm glad you didn't do that with Marcia because she was the youngest. I mean, I had to marry Steve, and that, I don't know if that would have worked out so well. I married the baby of the family. And so Jacob had to work another 7 years to get the woman that he loved. 14 years he worked. And they were married. They started their families together. Rachel couldn't get married. Couldn't get pregnant. Leah had a son, Reuben. And long story short, they started having children. Except Rachel couldn't have any children. So Leah was having children, but she couldn't have. She said, Jacob, hey, Jacob, have my maid. Get her pregnant. That'll be my child, okay? And then Leah couldn't have children for a little bit, and she was like, here, have my maid, and that'll be, And so Jacob, through the whole process, ends up basically with sons and daughters, but basically 12 sons, okay? Joseph was next to the youngest. He was the firstborn of the woman that he loved, Rachel. Now, he wasn't the oldest. He was just the oldest of the woman that he worked 14 years for. And he created him a coat. And the Hebrew word for that coat is not many colors. We get it because it means long-sleeved. It was an ornate robe. It did have many colors. It was ornate. It was a symbol, a sign of what I would term as BTO, big-time operator. He's the guy that pulls up in the nice big dually pickup. Shannon, we call them contractors. They pull up in that pickup and they're just watching everybody make sure they do their job, and then they got to go to lunch. And so I know you work harder than that, but it's just the idea. It's like the oldest son. His responsibility was to make sure that the farm, that the ranch, that everything ran like it was supposed to. He really didn't work hands-on. He made sure everybody did what was supposed to be done. Joseph gets that coat. Makes all those other 10 brothers ticked off. Especially when Joseph's sitting around the dinner table and they go, Joseph's like, I had a dream. We were all out, mom and dad and all the brothers. We were gathering wheat and we were putting them in bundles and tying them up. And my bundles, I was stacking them up. And all of a sudden I realized in this dream that all the bundles of my brothers and mom and dad are around mine and they're all bowing down. Doesn't that mean that all of you guys are going to bow down to me? How do you think that went over? Not very good. Jacob's like, hey, Joseph, your brothers have been ranging the flock over there, and they've been gone for quite a while. Go take some supplies to them and check on them and see how they're doing. And so he goes over there, and on his way in, he's like, hey guys, how you doing? He goes, remember that dream about the sheaves and the wheat and all that stuff? He goes, I had another dream about stars, and the sun and the moon, and they all bow down to me. And Judah's like, all right, I've had it. I've had it enough with this dreamer. Let's kill him. They just threw him in a pit. And a caravan came by. And Reuben, being the oldest of the sons and being the more responsible one's like, well, we can't kill him. That wouldn't be good. But let's sell him into slavery. So he talks to brothers into selling him into slavery. He'll be out of our hair. He'll be gone. We'll come up with this plan. We'll kill a goat and we'll spill some blood on that ornate robe of his and take it to Daddy and say, man, we were coming back and we found this coat, isn't this Joseph's coat? And he must have been killed by a coyote or a wolf or something like that. And so that's what they did. Joseph's story continues on. He's sold into slavery to a guy named Potiphar, a general, a major in the army, in the Egyptian army. Look at this. I don't have this up here, but Genesis 39, verse 2, it says this. Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, and the Egyptian had brought him from the Ishmaelites, had bought him from the Ishmaelites and brought him down to there. And verse 2 says, now get this, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became successful. And he was in the house of the Egyptian master, and the master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in the hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and he attended him, and he made him overseer of his whole household. Isn't that interesting? We read that and we go, the Lord was with Joseph. Now, in the Sunday school story, we're going, yeah, oh, it's awesome. But wait a minute. He's a slave. He has to be told what to do. He's punished. He's not with his parents. He's not with his family. He's in a culture that he doesn't even know, a language that he can't even speak. And yet God is with him. And you're going, no, wait a minute. God's with his brothers. They sold him. You know, God's with the Potiphar because he's like the head captain guard of the whole army. No. The Lord is with Joseph. And if you remember the story, Potiphar's wife really liked the way Joseph looked. And she kept making advances at him. In the Hebrew, it's two words. It's sex now. I want sex now. And Joseph's like, no, I can't do this. This wouldn't be right because of your husband, my boss. Can't do that. And he's like, no, I can't do this because it would be a sin against my God. I can't do this. And one day, I think she just has it out for him. She's just going to rape him. And she grabs his coat. And this is kind of my view of it. You know, remember guys playing on the playground when you play tag or whatever, and during wintertime and you got that big heavy coat on and they grab your coat and you just throw your arms back and you slip right out of it and you keep going, you know, so they can't catch you. They really haven't caught you. And that's what it seems like is that Joseph, he flees. He just runs out of his coat and he runs and she takes that and she goes to Potiphar, her husband, and she says, see, I've got evidence. That slave of yours that you put in charge of everything, he tried to rape me and threw it down. It was a complete lie. What does he have to do? He has to imprison him. He throws him in jail. It's easy for him to do because he's the captain of the guard. He didn't have to do anything. He just has to march him down there and he's booked. And he gets thrown in the prison, the dungeon, the deepest, darkest place. He doesn't become a slave of somebody else and have to pay his debt. He's actually thrown into the deepest, darkest place. It's interesting. It says in verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph, and he showed him steadfast love. Isn't that an interesting word? He's in prison, and God's showing him love? It's like, wait a minute. And gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison, and the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners. Wow. You mean God's really with Joseph in the deepest, darkest times in his life? Yeah, so much so that he showed him love. It's interesting because he gets in charge of all the prisoners. One day the cupbearer, the butler, and the baker, I don't know where the candlestick maker is, but the butler and the baker, they get up and they're like, Joseph, we had this dream. They were talking about it, and Joseph's like, well, tell me, what's your dream? And so he tells them, and God reveals to Joseph, oh, I know what these mean. Really? The cupbearer, the butler, he goes, yeah, you're going to be restored back to your position. You're actually going to be cupbearer again. Really? Yeah. Hey, when you get back to Pharaoh, because you're going to be close to the most powerful man in the country, could you see if he could exonerate me? Because I'm innocent. I have done nothing wrong. I didn't even do anything wrong to get thrown into slavery. Could you say something? Sure. Well, the baker's like, what about me? What about me? It's like, oh, your dream's not so good. I'm sorry, but in a couple of days, you're gone. And it happened just so. The butler got his job back, and he's the cupbearer to the Pharaoh, and he's taking care of business, and he's doing what needs to be done, and guess what? He forgets Joseph for 2 years. For 2 years, completely forgets about him. 2 years. I don't know how long he stayed in that pit. Well, probably overnight. I don't know how long he was in slavery. I don't know really how long he was in prison. But I do know at a point when he saw some light where he might have a chance, for 2 years he was forgotten. At your deepest, darkest time in your life, when you feel like you've been forgotten, you feel like there's not God, there's not nobody for you, the Lord was with Joseph. To the point that the cupbearer hears about a dream that the Pharaoh had. The wise men show up, and guess what? Nobody can figure it out. Nobody knows what's going on. The butler's like, oh, wait a minute. There's this kid. He interpreted my dream. And it happened, just like my dream said it would happen. And the Pharaoh's like, well, get him. So they go down to prison, they find him, they clean him up, they bring him before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's like, hey, I hear you can interpret my dream. And Joseph's like, I can't, but God can. My God can. Now, this is a slap into the face of Pharaoh, because pharaohs at this time were considered deity. They were considered gods. And Joseph's saying, my God's better than you. And he's like, well, tell me. So he tells him the dream, and Joseph's like, well, here's the dream. Here's what it means. You're going to have 7 good years, and you're going to have 7 years of famine. Really? Yeah. Here's what you need to do. You need to do this, and this, and it'll take care of all that. Pharaoh's like, you know what? I'm impressed. I'm going to put you in charge, and you will only answer to me. Isn't that crazy? Dylan, would you show me my Genesis part? Look at this. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried. Now, this is when his brothers came back, and they needed food, and they showed up, and he set them up, and he did all this stuff. And he finally got to the point where he could not contain himself anymore, and he needed to reveal who he was. Because Joseph had a plan. He cried, make everyone go out from me. And this is all the Egyptians in the room, all those who take care, because Joseph's a BTO. I mean, he's the type of guy who's going, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. So no one stayed with him. Joseph made himself what? Known to his brothers. Now, this is an interesting fact. I mean, if you look at this, Adam knew his wife Eve. She bare a son. Judah says knew his wife, or not his wife, but knew his sister-in-law, Tamar. Time and time again, it says that the husband knew the wife, and a child was born. And I've always wondered, how could Joseph convince these men that they were brothers? I mean, I'm assuming he looked like an Egyptian, he walked like an Egyptian, talked like an Egyptian. So how would he have made himself known? There was one symbol that differentiated the Israelites from all other people. the circumcision. That's why I made everybody get out of the room, guys. I got to reveal myself here, you know. Look what happened. Go to the next one. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Go on. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? I've got a plan. But his brothers could not answer him, for they were freaked out. Right? They were dismayed at his presence. Look at this. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. They came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now get this. Go on. Now do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourself. You sold me here. But God sent me here. You sold me. But God sent me here before you to preserve your life. God's got a plan. It was a detour, but it's all part of God's plan. He spun this thing into motion because he knew I needed to save you. And the long story short was that he saved the nation of Israel. God brought them to Egypt, and he put them in an incubator, and he grew a nation out of them, and he moved them into the promised land, to that, even to the point that we come through all of the trials, all of the troubles, all the detours that they've had in their life. God was with them. God showed favor upon them. In the deepest, darkest times in our lives, God showed his great love to us, that he loved us. God was with Joseph in the pit. He was with Joseph in the prison, and he was with Joseph in the palace. God is with you. God is in control. God is in control of all history. I like this translation. It's his story. Now get this. 2 Corinthians 1, 1 through 8. Do we have that? 2 Corinthians 1? I can't remember if I put that in or not. I just want to show you this real quick. Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, by the will of God, and Timothy our brother, to the church of God that is in Corinth, with all the saints in the whole Achaia area. Okay, go on. Grace to you and peace from God our Father, Lord Jesus Christ. Verse 3. Blessed be the God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, the God of all what? Comfort. In your deepest, darkest times. See, look, he goes on. Who comforts us in all of our what? In all your affliction, he comforts you. In all your various trials, he comforts you. So that we may be able to comfort who? Those who are in any affliction with the comfort from which we ourselves are comforted by God. You're a conduit. You take the comfort of God during your deepest, darkest times, the peace that passes all understanding, and it begins to flow through you and work in you and flow out of you to those that are around you, that when you see their affliction, you're able to share with them that comfort. You've been forgiven of much, you can forgive much. You've been loved much by God, you can love others much. To the point that even Jesus said, love your enemies. Love those who persecute you. Love those who turn their back on you. Love those that you don't even trust. You know, God never wastes a pain. You throw up your hands. You yell and scream. You wonder, God, where are you? But I can guarantee you this, that God never wasted a pain that Joseph went through. God never wasted an opportunity because God was with him. You may be hurting this morning. You may be struggling. Or you've hurt and you've struggled. God has a plan and a purpose for that pain. Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to those who what? Love the Lord. All things work together for good to those who love the Lord. I can guarantee you, God will never waste your pain. Let's pray.